What does the word Jewish mean? Who is Jewish? What makes a Jewish person? These are some questions that came up to me when I started my independent Jewish studies project. When my mind goes to think of a Jew, the first images to pop up are people like Barbra Streisand, Adam Sandler, Seinfeld, or Mark Zuckerberg, the people who are the typical Jewish faces of America. That very nerdy and white as sheet stereotype. I never thought that this mindset was an issue. They are Jews, what's the big deal? I didn't give much thought of these stereotypes as a big deal until this year, until in the media, the idea of Jews being a race was a hot topic. 2017 Wonder Woman was taking over the headlines. The buzz was not only surrounding the excitement over a strong woman figure for girls all over the world, but because of the lead actress playing Wonder Woman, Gal Gadot. There were many petty complaints on her body, but there was mostly stir about another white actress playing the lead. This received a response from Matthew Mueller from comicbooks.com, who argued that Gal Gadot is not actually Caucasian, but is in fact Israeli. Gal Gadot is an Israeli actress who was born in the Middle East, Israel, yet her roots are from Eastern Europe. This caused a lot of controversy. This forced up a question of debate if Jews are a race if they aren't white. When I first heard of this debate, I thought it was the dumbest question I've ever heard. Judaism is a religion. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines Judaism as a religion developed among the ancient Hebrews and categorized by belief in one transcendent God who has revealed himself to Abraham, Moses, and the Hebrew prophets, and by a religious life in accordance with scriptures and rabbinic traditions. If we were talking about a race refers to a person's physical characteristics, such as a bone structure and skin, hair, or eye color. So how can we be the same if there are Jews all over from the world, from China to India to Canada to the USA? Jews even have different traditions in celebrating Judaism and have very different cultures. The idea of Jews being a race made no sense to me because not only did I think it was a stupid idea or a stupid question, because I'm Jewish and grew up as a Jew, but I'm not white. I grew up in the Bay Area and practiced Judaism, like most people who surrounded me. I've never felt different as a Jew. I just grew up as a Jew with different traditions. I've never felt that growing up as a Latina and as an Israeli Moroccan interfered with my faith as being a Jew. I felt the answer was so obviously there, that Judaism and race had nothing to do together. But what I could not understand was why it wasn't so obvious to other people, especially in the United States. So I wanted to look back and see where these preconceptions of Jews being white or a race came from. Even though we are looking at the subject through the lens of American history, these ideas of race and Jews being these outsiders in whatever community they're in has been this never-ending institutionalized domino effect. Historically, it is known Jews faced much anti-Semitism from Roman times to present and probably the future. Discrimination and hate is nothing new. In Europe, Jews have always been a distinct group. Jews were not only distinct group because of their difference in religion, where most of the population in Europe were under Christian domination, but never accepted or assimilated to the Christian truth of Jesus. Jews were just very different. They were living in shtetls, only marrying Jews, speaking their own language. Their culture was different, and they overall considered themselves a completely different nationality. This made Jews a distinct and different people in Europe. Not knowing what else to call Jews, people would just associate them as a race because they were so different culturally. The word race somehow clung to the word Jews. Even though there's a world filled with a diversity of Jews, European Jews were the most known Jews. Jews faced a lot of backlash and anti-Semitism for who they were, but the worst was in the Holocaust from 1933 to 1944. It was argued by Hitler that the Germans were the purest race, being pale, blonde-haired, and blue-eyed, and it was believed that everyone else was impure and a threat to the German race. People of color, gypsies, and homosexuals were murdered. The Nazi Party, though, focused particularly on getting rid of the Jewish race. September 15, 1935, the Nuremberg laws that were put in place were in a way to keep the Aryan race pure. These new laws revoked citizenship from Jews and prohibited Jews from marrying or having sexual relations with persons of German or related blood, even though they were Germans themselves. These laws defined Jews as anyone who had 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents, regardless whether the individual identified himself or herself as a Jew or belonged to a Jewish religious community. These laws escalated to different races, people with sicknesses, to gypsies, and people who are just different. There are 2 waves of immigration Jews made to the United States. The first wave was from Jews from Germany. This was during pre-Civil War time. Jews of Slavic origin constituted the second wave of Jewish immigration. Between 1881 and 1925, 2,625,000 Jews immigrated from Eastern Europe to the United States. By 1915, 1 out of every 4 New Yorkers were Jewish. As Jews were immigrating, they tried to immediately create better lives for themselves. Many were ready to work and become successful. Jewish American families placed a high emphasis on scholarships and entry into 3 professions: theology, law, and medicine. Jews were commonly talked about, especially their ambition, sure test of the individual's or race's future. The New York Journal of Commerce and Commercial Bulletin wrote, as Jews were becoming more successful economically, people's opinions went from praisal to concern about Jews. An American labor coordinator pointed out the awful environment of the, quote, Jewish sweatshop, which he had said, quote, tragic price paid by the ambitious race, quote, and then, money is their god. This competition and ambition scared many Americans. There's a common thread in America, especially for white people, to oppress people that they fear might do better than them. It is easy to oppress someone of color or to oppress someone who looks different than you because they're so distinct in their looks. Yet Jews remained a figure of uncertainty that could not be pinned down to any clear set of racial criteria. There's this trend that started where Jews were being often compared to African Americans to conform them into one group. Most of the time, these comparisons would always be in bad context. A writer for the World's Work argued in an article exploring the declining birth rate among civilized people that the Negro and the Jew are sure to gain relatively on the other races of our population. There was more and more commentary on Jews as a whole and trying to force this idea of them being a despicable race. Jacob Rees, American newspaper reporter, argued that Jews and Italians were far inferior to the Negro in terms of cleanliness, making them sound like the worst tenants ever. Socialist Frederick Bush's observation on Jews in Boston was, there are actually streets on the West End where, while Jews are moving in, Negro housewives are gathering up their skirts and seeking a near spotless environment. This is to portray that Jews are unclean. African Americans had to face since the birth of America the stereotypes and portrayal of being a primitive people. The way articles were portraying Jews as this primitive group was making it easier to categorize Jews as a race and group them with African Americans. The book, The Jew and the Negro, published in 1910 by North Carolina minister and professor Arthur Abertley, argued that the ancient Jews had thoroughly mixed with neighboring African peoples, leaving little significance between them. He believed that as Jews migrated, their skin got lighter. He was trying to link common stereotypes between them. For example, little regard for the truth, no artistic taste, cunning and susceptibility to bribery, traits and stereotypes that weren't that great. He also tried to compare physical traits like dark hair, sensual lips, animal jaw, Jew eyes that were dark and brown. Skin color of Jews was described as swarthy and interpreted as connections to blacks. Army surgeon Major Charles E. Woodruff, author of The Effects of Tropical Light on White Men, also used the descriptions of full and sensual lips, swarthy complexion, dark eyes, and hair to describe Jews. One portrayal of Jews is making them sexual predators. The Leo Frank case in 1913 to 1915 is where a Jewish factory manager in Atlanta was accused of raping and murdering a white girl who worked at that factory. Journalist and populist leader Tom Watson compared Jews, Frank, to African Americans accused of rape. He said in 1915, every student of sociology knows that the black man's lust after the white woman is not much fiercer than the lust of a licentious Jew for Gentiles. Many Jews did not like being compared to African Americans and wanted to have no part of being interpreted as a colored race. Early 20th century Jews were determined to separate themselves from these stereotypes. Julian Morgenstern, a young Reform rabbi and professor at Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati, suggested that Jews' efforts to open hotels to all races was a bad idea. I have never invited a Negro to dine with me, and probably never will. Jews tried to speed Jewish social acceptance by emphasizing Jewish whiteness. In 1902, Jewish clubs staged their own blackface minstrel shows. Over time, they even tried assimilating into American culture. Just like other white people, they fled to the suburbs. Many of them stopped speaking Yiddish, and many of them stopped going to synagogue. Many of them stopped wearing the accoutrements of Jewishness. Some Jews felt to speed this process up, they need to portray their whiteness publicly by discrimination and using racial prejudice in terms towards black children in their neighborhoods. For example, Charles Rubin recalled in Atlanta, the term nigger was used by Jewish sons of immigrants' parents with the same venom and contempt as the term zid was used in the old country. When I look back to historically, and I looked at today and compared them, it made me realize where all this discrimination and where all these ideas of race built up on. I knew how this was affecting the whole country, but I wanted to know locally in my school what people's mindsets were around the idea of Jews of color. I made a survey about people of color and sent it around my school. The questions were meant to be open and give my peers as much room to give off their opinions. Some of the answers that I saw were either trending or some of them even struck out to me. In the question, what do you think of the phrase Jews of color? The results to me were not expected. The two common trending answers was mostly a Jew who isn't white, and then the second common one was black or African American. I thought that was quite interesting because Jew of color, they associate color with only black or African American when color is supposed to spread with people who are Asian. I went through the answers and I chose the ones that stood out to me the most. These are answers of what people thought of the word of Jew of color meant. I think Jews of color that aren't from the main area of where Jews are from, like Jews whose families are originally in Africa, Asia, or Latin America country. I think of Ethiopian Jews walking in the desert to Israel. Another was, I think of stories I've heard of Jews in places like Uganda or somewhere far away. I found it really odd, the first part of the answer. I think Jews of color are Jews that aren't from the main area where Jews are from. Where are Jews mainly from then? What's the main area of Jews are from? And so I think it's important that when we look back, you can see even here in this answer, this is what kind of the effects of history are. But not all answers were like that, and a lot were very open-minded, saying, I don't know, I've never heard of that phrase. Which a lot of answers that are saying that this the color, the race is irrelevant. Jews are Jews. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, or anything, you're a Jew. The next question that I asked on the survey was, what are ways the Jewish community can be more inclusive of Jews of color? Some of them kind of bothered me, where it says we can't be any more inclusive, that there's no problem in inclusivity, just there aren't many. Or I think there were plenty inclusive already. Oh, but there was a lot of very great answers. They were saying that I think there should be less stereotypes about Jews of color. There should be more education on it. Jews should have, of different cultures, should be eating together and having dinners to understand each other. There should be more rabbis who are people of color representing the Jewish community. Some answers, though, were a bit odd. Jews who have more economic privilege should be aware of this and speak out against systematic oppression of Jews of color. I think that answer itself, that's portraying Jews of color as people who are victims. One of my favorite answers is unnecessary. I've never heard someone say Christian of color. A Jew is a Jew independent of race. And I think that's very true. And I think it says it there, basically. I've never heard someone be called Christian of color. I've never heard someone be called Muslim of color, or Buddhist of color, or any other religion of color. I think it's just a concept made by society. In every religion, there's poor people, there's rich people, there's smart people, there's dumb people. It's a diversity of people. There's black, whites, people, Chinese, Japanese, all over. It's no different than any religion. This documentary wasn't meant to point fingers at people. It was about showing this point of view that never gets talked about. And I think being a Jew of color, I think that's a stupid sentence to say. I am a Jew, and that's it.